Alright, how's it going guys? Welcome back to the channel. So first of all, I know it's been a while since I've done my last video. Mainly that's due to a couple of reasons. The first being that things have been a bit busier lately than usual, and also I've experienced some technological problems actually, just with my phone memory being overloaded and also my computer failing to import photos and videos, so all sorts of crap really. So it's just delayed me making another video, so I do apologize because I want to keep the channel up. So anyway, this is my second attempt to make this video, so hopefully it's okay today. So what I've got for you is just another collection update. I've actually had a few releases coming in lately, so I'm trying to keep up and clear the backlog. So today I've got 4 CDs to talk about. I got these about over a month ago, I think. We'll get straight into it. 4 CDs to talk about and 2 genres of music, death metal and heavy metal, so a little bit different from the previous black metal videos. The first album that I picked up lately was Puncture Wound with Complete Carnage of Coagulating Cacophonous Corpses. So that is quite a mouthful of a title. So if you're not familiar, Puncture Wound is a death metal band from Australia, and I'm assuming that the band name was inspired by Cannibal Corpse, who of course have a song called Puncture Wound Massacre, and also in the Bleeding song, The Pickaxe Murders, they have that line, Puncture Wounds to the Head. So yep, you can pretty much guess what you're going to get on this album. Actually, it's quite funny though. I expected this to be sort of slammy death metal based on the cover art, which I think is really cool, and also the title and the kind of script, the font. But actually, this is just solid, brutal, old school death metal, and I made that assessment myself, but then I later confirmed in the spine it says old school death metal. So basically, this is nothing new or groundbreaking, but it is an excellent album. Basically, it's just classic old school death metal. So it contains all of the elements of brutal death metal, done the old school 90s way. So initially, bands like Cannibal Corpse, especially old Cannibal Corpse, and Suffocation spring to mind, but it's a bit less technical than those bands and more straightforward, if you like. So just solid and brutal. Now this album is very riffy, and it contains a variety of tempos though, ranging from bouncy and catchy to galloping to slow death doom kind of crawls. But there are loads of catchy moments on this album and twists and turns to keep you interested. And this is all topped off with some melodic and atmospheric guitar solos. So it's brutal for the most part, but there are also melodic elements to it. So just consulting my notes here. Yeah, so as for the drums on this album, I would say they're actually a highlight of the music. They're very clattery and heavy, but really solid, and they add to the heaviness of the music. And while there are loads of blast beats, they often shift to a slower time to leave space for these sort of open power chord riffs, which are featured prominently on this album. As for the lead vocals, or the vocals, they are low and brutal, but also dry. When I say dry, I mean in a good way, because one thing I'm not against, this isn't slam death metal, this is old school death metal, but what I don't like about slam death metal is sometimes the vocals are really gurgly and overly moist, you know, and it's indecipherable, but the vocals on this are just that kind of dry old school death metal sound, sort of like in the vein of, you know, Chris Barnes on the Bleeding, something like that, but not replicating that, but just solid old school brutal death metal vocals. This album, there are no bad songs. I like all of them pretty much, except if I had to define my favorites, they're probably most of the songs. So they include track 2, which is entitled Occasional Butchery, so some funny titles here. Also track 4, Murder Ket, which is a blended made up word from murder etiquette, so etiquette of murder. Also track 6, Inflicting Horror, track 7, Anthem of Agony, track 8, Postmortem Frenzy, and track 9, Devoid Mausoleum. So as you can see, I've mentioned most of the songs on the album, but yeah, I find, as with a lot of albums, in the second half it just gets better and better. And then the album closes with track 10 entitled Darkened Ways, which is an atmospheric clean guitar track, so some sort of like some calmness after the storm, if you like. But yeah, really good album. If you like old school death metal, I'd strongly recommend checking it out. Just have a look at the booklet. First of all, I love that artwork, you know, with these old school horned helmets of the sadists, sort of like from the evil warriors in Conan the Barbarian. And then you have the booklet, and the art direction is pretty cool. Yep, so as you can expect from the pictures, the artwork and the layout, the lyrics are also quite old school in terms of death metal lyrics, but that's the kind of stuff that most of us like, so no complaints there. I'll just show you the disc as well, so nice and colorful. Yeah, So absolutely brilliant album. So I'm not sure if I mentioned this, Puncture Wound are a band from Australia, Queensland actually, so sunny Queensland up north. So as I said, this album is not exactly groundbreaking or new, but who cares? You don't have to reinvent the wheel. As I've said many times, if a band plays a style of music which I like really well, then I will enjoy it, and this is no exception. So check it out. From Australia, this is Puncture Wound with Complete Carnage of Coagulating Cacophonous Corpses. And I'm getting more comfortable saying that. Okay. Up next, here's some more brutal death metal, this time from Canada. I picked up Intestinal Hex with The Exalted Chambers of Abhorrence. So this particular band, Intestinal Hex, a Canadian band, they are released by the same label as Puncture Wound, so CDN Records, which is a Canadian label, and they specialize mostly in death metal. So go and check out their website, CDN Records. They have loads of death metal albums for about 11 to 12 Canadian dollars, which is about the same as Australian dollars, maybe 8 or 9 US, but really cheap. And that's how I got these from a friend in Thailand actually. He got these and I thought, you know what, there's so much good death metal out there these days, and I haven't picked up some newer, more obscure bands lately, so I decided to get these. Great value. Anyway, so Intestinal Hex is a bit different to Puncture Wound. I would describe this as brutal death metal with a death doom edge. So when I heard the first track, which is called Bowels Transmogrified, I assumed that this would be a death doom album because it's extremely slow and heavy. So some of you might know I'm not the biggest fan of doom metal per se, just because I prefer faster music. Like, I find doom a bit slow. Like, slow and heavy is good, but all the time it's a bit much. Death doom, yeah, I do like, especially Autopsy, of course, but I wouldn't say I'm an over doomy kind of fan. But as it turns out, this album is not. Like, it's got some doomy moments, but it actually picks up the pace. So the first track, it sort of grew on me with its haunting crawl, but then it gradually built up to a faster speed, and then with track 2, entitled Lakes of Vomit, it cranks into fast blast beats with chugging riffs, which is mostly what you get on this album. So it's not too fast, not too slow, just a good pace, just a good mid-paced brutal death metal album. So right in the middle of the tempo range, so nice and catchy. It also features some melodic guitar solos and some bass solo interludes. The way I would describe the guitar tone on this album, it's extremely heavy, down-tuned, sludgy and doomy, and it sounds similar to the guitar tone on Mortician's Chainsaw Dismemberment album. So that kind of sound where it's lacking melody because it's so crunchy and heavy, but sounds really cool. The drumming on this album is solid and hammering, with use of a lot of double kick and double bass, so you're tapping your head along constantly. As for the vocals, they consist of deep growls, but they're kind of cavernous and dark, lending to that doomy kind of feeling again, along with some high-pitched shrieks. What's interesting about Intestinal Hex is, at least for this album, you can mostly understand what the vocalist is saying. So this whole album is a really interesting listen. As I said, it's a variety of tempos. Probably my favorite track on this is track 8, which is entitled Parasitic Hallucinations. That's particularly interesting because it's very doomy, but featuring some clean guitars and some jammy and experimental segments. So it's more than simply brutal death metal. So I would say when I first heard this album, I thought, oh, it's not really my cup of tea, but it gradually grew on me. So there you go. Sometimes that's the best kind of music. You know, it doesn't grab you straight away. But anyway, yep, really good album. I'll just show you the cover art. I like the logo, and you know, I think the artwork is pretty accurate of what you can find inside. Yep, lyrics, just like with Puncture Wound, kind of small, but as I said, you can understand what he's saying most of the time anyway. And there we have the disc with the CDN Records logo. Yeah, so essentially, this is brutal death metal with some doomy moments and segments, and also some interesting and experimental moments. So yes, if you're looking for death metal with something slightly different, I would recommend this. So this is Intestinal Hex with The Exalted Chambers of Abhorrence. So once again, both of these are available through CDN Records in Canada, so check out their website. All right, so the next two CDs, we're shifting to a different genre of music, but talking about the same band actually. This was an album that I wanted to pick up basically as soon as I heard it, which was earlier this year. Here we have Megaton Sword with Blood Hails Steel, Steel Hails Fire. So this is a band that I actually discovered through YouTube. So what's interesting about this VC community is watching other people's videos. They give descriptions, they make recommendations, and you go and check it out. That's part of the fun. So I saw this on Chris's channel, Chris from Audio Obsession in Canada. He bought this album on vinyl, and I just heard his description and I thought that sounds really interesting. I'm going to check it out. If you're not familiar, Megaton Sword are a Swiss heavy metal band, and they play a style of music which is considered the new wave of British heavy metal. So in other words, it's the next generation emulating that sound of the new wave of British heavy metal, which was prominent in Britain in the early 1980s. Bands like Iron Maiden, Saxon, who else? Angel Witch, Tigers of Pantang, blah, blah, blah. You know, so that kind of sound. Obviously, this band's not British. As I said, they're Swiss, but new wave of British heavy metal, it's almost become a genre name. So yeah, if it captures the old feeling of heavy metal from the early 1980s, but what I really like about this band, what makes them stand apart from all others, are the vocals. So the vocals are unique. Usually with this kind of music, you expect a soaring, screechy kind of high vocal, but this lead vocalist, he's got a kind of, his vocals remind me a bit of King Diamond in Merciful Fate, but wait, not the high-pitched, you know, really falsetto wails, but you know, sort of that mid-range that King Diamond does. Think of the Merciful Fate song, A Dangerous Meeting, you know, the first couple of lines, he sings that kind of mid-range wail. That's what this singer's vocals are like. So really interesting, and it's very sort of like melancholic and haunting, and I really think this band sounds like no other. So this is their debut full-length album. It's absolutely brilliant. I like all songs on this album. It sort of just flows from beginning to end, but my favorite tracks are track 1, Blood Hails Steel, Steel Hails Fire, just a great opening track, the title track. Also track 2, which is called Nareen, and then track 5, Minstrels, and lastly track 8, The Giver's Embrace. So yeah, fantastic new wave of British heavy metal. That artwork is absolutely epic. It accurately depicts the music which is portrayed in this album. And have a look at this. Fantastic lyrics and book layout, very theatrical. That's another thing I was going to say. This band, it's sort of, the sound is more like new wave of British heavy metal, but in terms of atmosphere, it captures the drama of Manowar without sounding like Manowar. So, but those same sort of like soaring epic moments that you might enjoy about Manowar's earlier music. Yeah, and yeah, you can see it's sort of like all of the lyrics are surrounding battle and sort of fantasy, and I really like that. You know, I know people like James Hetfield say, I prefer sort of punky lyrics that you can relate to in real life. I hate, he said he hated like riding on a horse carrying a sword fantasy crap. I disagree. I love that kind of stuff. So that's what you get on here. And they also have interesting theatrical names like Uzi Unchained, so he's the vocalist. Chris the Axe on guitar. Simon the Sorcerer on bass. And Dan Thundersteel on drums. So there you go. Very heavy metal, as you can guess by those descriptions. So yeah, like I said, just classic heavy metal, but with an original edge. This is Megaton Sword with Blood Hails Steel, Steel Hails Fire. One of the most impressive albums I've heard this year across the genres, so fantastic. And on that note, because my friend in Thailand was also selling another title by this band, I decided to pick it up. So this is another album. This is an EP by Megaton Sword. This is Niralet or Niralet, I'm not sure how you pronounce it, but this is a 5-track EP. I think this came out before this full-length album, but equally brilliant, like exactly the same style that I just described, but this was the band's initial release, just 5 tracks. They're all really fantastic once again, but my favorite tracks are track 3, Born Beneath the Sword, which features some theatrical vocals, and also track 4, which is entitled For Glory. That's a brilliant song, very Manowar-esque in terms of the lyrics, you know, talking about the triumph of battle and thrusting cold steel into enemies, all that good stuff. And also track 5, which is Realms to Conquer. So you can guess by these kind of titles, that's what I mean by it invokes the drama of Manowar. But yeah, as I said, completely original, fresh heavy metal sound, particularly in terms of the vocals. So yeah, another great EP. So just showing that epic artwork, which is awesome. And here's the lyric sheet again. So picture of the band. Once again, I haven't really followed along these lyrics, but the lyrics are decipherable when you listen to it, so you don't really need to read the lyric sheet. But yeah, another fantastic album of new wave of British heavy metal. Megaton Sword from Switzerland with Niralet, the EP, or Niralet. All right, guys, so thankfully I've managed to get through this today. Now, hopefully I don't have the technical issue where I can't copy it to my computer and I can't edit it. I really hope I can upload this soon because I've been keeping people waiting for a long time, so thanks for your patience. On that note, I just want to say I've noticed that I've got a lot of new subscribers lately, and I really appreciate that. So thanks a lot, guys, and thanks to everyone else for your continued support. I hope you continue watching, and if this goes according to plan and I can get it uploaded, I promise I won't be as long with the next video. So stay tuned, and I'll be back soon with the next collection update. So in the meantime, take care, and I'll talk to you soon. Cheers.